Just look at the calendar. There's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday is the last day of the week, and that is all. Can you name the days of the week? Can you name the days of the week? Can you name the days of the week? Just look at the calendar. Sing them in Spanish. Sing them in Spanish. Domingo, lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, y sábado es el último día, se acabó. Can you name the days of the week? Can you name the days of the week? Can you name the days of the week? Just look at the calendar. Can you name the days of the week? Can you name the days of the week? Can you name the days of the week? Just look at the calendar. Just look at the calendar. Just look at the calendar.
When I think about America, I think of so many things. It's my country, the United
flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, justice for all, justice for all, justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, of the United States of America, of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, justice for all, justice for all, justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, of the United States of America, of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, justice for all. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, justice for all, justice for all.
When I think about America, I think of so many things. It's my country, the United States, and it means so much to me. Green, green forests, having nice schools, voting for the president, red, white, and blue, playing in my neighborhood, believing in dreams. Oh, this is America to me. Celebrating holidays, pledge to our flag, great big mountains, learning all you can, all different colors, being what you want to be. Oh, this is America to me. Oh, this is America, land that I love, my country, the United States, under one shining sun. So many different people, together proud and free. This is America, America to me. All kinds of ice cream, animals on farms, pilgrims at Thanksgiving, boats, trains, and cars, helping each other, people I love. Oh, this is America to me. Oh, this is America, land that I love, my country, the United States, under one shining sun. So many different people, together proud and free. This is America, America to me. This is America, land that I love, my country, the United States, under one shining sun. So many different people, together proud and free. Oh, this is America, America to me. This is America, America to me. When I think about America, I think of so many things. It's my country, the United States, and it means so much to me. Green, green forests, having nice schools, voting for the president, red, white, and blue, playing in my neighborhood, believing in dreams. Oh, this is America to me. farm.
that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Pilgrims at Thanksgiving, boats, trains, and cars, helping each other. People I love. Oh, this is America to me. Oh, this is America, land that I love. My country, the United States, under one shining sun. So many different people together.
Oh, yeah, we can do that. We'll figure it out.
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's go. Good morning, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you to our annual Veterans Day celebration, which is a signature event for Windermere Preparatory School. I want to extend this morning a very special welcome to all of the veterans who are in the audience. If today is your first time to attend this program, we hope that you will enjoy our celebration enough to make it an annual event in your calendar. And to all vets who have returned today, including former Veterans Day speaker, Mr. Larry Godwin. Larry, would you stand? I want to welcome all of you back. So pleased to have you in attendance with us. As we pay our respects and thank our veterans for their service to our country, I hope that everyone here today will take away from today's assembly a greater appreciation for the opportunity that you have been given by the accident of birth, by deliberate intention, and/or by the grace of God to live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. 2 very short years ago, I shared with you some thoughts in a poem entitled The American Dream. Since that time, we've all witnessed many shocking things happening in our country, which I strongly suspect most of our World War II and Korean War veterans likely never would have imagined possible in the United States of America when they fought for this nation under the Star-Spangled Banner of red, white, and blue. Even Vietnam-era fighting men and women who returned home to where they too often experienced a shameful, seemingly ungrateful expression of feeling for their sacrifices and a lack of appreciation for their service, would never have imagined some of the things that we see happening routinely today. All of them and all of those veterans who have served more recently in places such as Panama, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, and other places of conflict or peacekeeping, or as members of humanitarian teams responding around the world, might well be asking themselves the following questions. Number one, what has happened to the notions of one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, and e pluribus unum, out of many, one? Question two, how and why has our historic notion of we Americans, unitas on a national scale, been seemingly replaced by the notions of me first, what's in it for me, or you're wrong and my group and I are right? What has happened to patriotism and the unifying symbols of our nation that were once revered with pride and appreciation, as evidenced by what we consider to be our great American spirit? When I heard several months ago the words, "No USA at all," at the end of a protest rant, I thought to myself, it is because we live in this country that we have the right to peacefully assemble. It is because we live in this country that we enjoy freedom of speech. And it is because we live in this country that we have the freedom to exercise our philosophical, political, and social preferences, all of these rights within the law. Each of these freedoms is an inherent right, legally protected for all of our citizens. These rights have been defended and preserved in battles that have been fought throughout the history of our nation by American veterans. But when I heard what I regarded to be an appalling, troubling utterance, "No USA at all," I had to wonder, how does any decent American of good conscience and even a modicum of common sense rationalize the verbalization of a desire to see this nation fall apart? Fifth, why is our nation and our systems of government and economics, which historically have been the envy of the world and which have lured millions of immigrants to our shores, been internally increasingly vilified over the past several years, and lately in particular. And finally, how and why have our politics become so ultra-ugly, destructive, hypocritical, cynical, and mean-spirited, producing a perilous great American ideological divide? With these questions and observations in mind, juxtaposed against the valor, the bravery, the heroism, the patriotism, the sacrifice, and the commitment to and love of this nation, as demonstrated throughout our history by American veterans, let me share with you my updated version of the American dream as a thought-provoking stimulus for your reflection and consideration today. Each day, I wake up in the land of the free, knowing you can be you and I can be me, each in control of his own destiny to live the American dream. We can worship, assemble, think and say what we please, as free as an eagle soaring high in the breeze. There are no fixed limits to what we can achieve as we chase the American dream. Be mindful, such liberty has come with a price. Bloodshed by many and great sacrifice to forge the legacy of freedom that allows you and me to pursue the American dream. Our world's spinning round at a furious pace, corruption and chaos all over the place, yet the eagle still flies, and we're free with our lives to pursue the American dream. But I'm troubled today by some things that I see, a nation divided so vehemently. Some forsake the pillars of our democracy, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the basic tenets of human decency. All throughout our history, imperfect though we've been, we've rallied to the aid of others time and time again. We've sought a perfect union, a model without peer, unparalleled in history. It's something to hold dear. Disrespect for the anthem of our nation and the flag for which it stands have now spiked to a boiling point. Incivility has gotten out of hand. We know a house divided is a house that will not stand. It's time to get our act together all across this land. So, what's at stake if we don't? I shudder to think. The USA in decline? The world on the brink? Lady Liberty's torch might no longer beam, and we could witness the death of the American dream. You see, some things are timeless. Some things are in vogue. Some respect timeless values, while others go rogue. We can now very well be at the fork in the road, where there are things we must save and some things unload. We've been blessed as a nation, but we must not forget the price paid for our birthrights. We must show respect. We've traveled a long path as a people free to pursue the American dream. It's fragile. It's precious. Yet, sadly, we too oft take for granted our sweet liberty. So let's pause, thank and honor those who selflessly served to preserve the American dream. I want to invite every American veteran here assembled to rise and accept the grateful thanks we feel for your service to the United States of America. May God bless you always.
Get up, let's go.
Thank you. It's now my great pleasure and privilege to introduce to you our Veterans Day keynote speaker. J.D. Wood served in the United States Army for 12 years in special operations as a ranger at 3rd Ranger Battalion in Fort Benning, Georgia. He also served with the 7th Special Forces Group during his military career. He was involved in the invasion of Panama during Operation Just Cause, which began on the morning of December 20th, 1989, overwhelming the Panamanian Defense Forces and leading to the fall of Panama's dictator, Manuel Noriega, and the liberation of that country. J.D. also served on many close missions in Central America during his military service to the United States. He was our Veterans Day speaker back in 2013, and many of you affectionately know him as Coach Wood. Please welcome him back to the stage at this time and get ready to receive a powerful, patriotic message. J.D., come on up.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to Windermere Prep, the faculty, Dr. Marcy, student body, and all you veterans that are here today. For me, this day is, like most veterans, a day where we give thanks to the ones that we couldn't bring home. We say to ourselves numerous times over and over again, why was it me that was spared and not him? Why was it that I'm coming home and he wasn't? Most of the veterans that are coming back from Syria and Libya and Afghanistan today, they suffer with this notion of guilt that their mission wasn't completed because they've come home and the other ones haven't. With that being said, I tell most veterans that I see coming home today from these wars that have wreaked havoc in our country, our world, have taken the voice of the weak and have twisted it. I say to them, you've been spared to tell their story. The story of who they were on the battlefield, the story they were as fathers, sons, daughters, loved ones, husbands, wives. And you're here to talk about the children that they left behind that won't ever know who their parents really were, or brothers or sisters. I start this speech this way in a renderance of saying the idea of Veterans Day is to remember those that haven't come back. Dr. Marcy's speech was spot on when he said about politics being divided. And I'm not going to get all into the politics because I really don't have all the answers. But what I can tell you is this. If the armed forces of the United States of America can bring in thousands and thousands of troops from all over this nation, from different religious backgrounds, from different lives, from different ways of being brought up in the world. And we solely as veterans and as the armed forces of the United States could complete one mission. And as a veteran, it is all about one mission. And that mission is to keep the fence of freedom wrapped around us so we can do the things that we need to do to prosper as a country. Then how is it the armed forces of the United States, with all of this going on around us, we get it? We all have different opinions. I stood with blacks, I stood with whites, I stood with Mexicans, I stood with all kinds, Chinese, Japanese. I've gone all over this world and back. But I can tell you this, the camouflage pattern is not different, it's the same. And that camouflage pattern sits under that flag right there. And that flag to me, which brings this point, is a symbol of the rest of the world to recognize that as a nation and as a powerful nation, we will still be here in every conflict that ever shows up. We will see the conflict through until we have crushed the voice of the weak. And we will stand with the weak to rebuild it so that they can be a part of our voice as one and one nation under God. Before you can have a nation, you have to have folks that are willing to fight for it. There are those that see the challenges of a nation and they say, send me. I lived under a code called sua sponte. It's of your own accord. I grew up on the west side of Chicago. In 1966, I was born on Veterans Day, so I basically had a calling for what I was doing. That was in November. In January, my folks had taken off and had left me and 3 siblings in an apartment by ourselves. Took another sibling with them. Over a period of 4 months, my brother had continually struggled to keep us together. So he ended up going to a radio station and basically saying, hey, I need some help. I can't do what I need to do. I've got siblings and they need a home. I was adopted by a couple, a couple that were in their mid-40s at the time. They couldn't have children of their own. They also adopted 2 other of my siblings. I say this to you because this country and this nation allows us to have that freedom to help children who don't have parents, or maybe their life has started out in a crippling fashion. With that being said, my folks at the time moved us to northern Illinois. I grew up on a farm. Needless to say, the whole farm experience and growing up without internet and without phones and without PlayStations and without Xbox and without Twitter and Instagram, my mind was free to grow as it needed to be. I spent many hours working on the farm. As I grew, my mom realized at the time I was going in a bad direction because my mind was beginning to take over on things that probably I shouldn't have been taken over on. I had lost my dad when I was 6 years old. That kind of tilted me in a direction that I kind of spiraled out of control. So like every good mom who takes a yardstick and a hammer and comes to you and says, you're either going to live in these roles under my house and my roof, or you're going to go somewhere else and you're going to learn how to do it. That lasted a week, and I found myself up at military school for the next 5 years. I knew then when I was standing there as a 6th grader at St. John's Military Academy, 1,000 miles away from my mom and 1,000 miles away from what I knew I had started. I knew that being in the military and I knew leading was going to be my calling. I was young. I was scared. I was by myself, but I knew at the end of the day that I needed to figure it out, and I needed to figure it out quick. I went into wrestling, I ran into football, I ran track. You name it, I did it, and I rose through the ranks of cadet major, one below the highest ranking cadet at St. John's Military Academy. My senior year, my mom pulled me back to tell me that, hey, I'm not paying for that education anymore. You're coming back for the last year. You're going to go to public high school. I found my boundaries in my life basically destruct before my eyes, but I kept rendering my thoughts of saying, I can do this. This is good. It's good for me to be back where I needed to be. I finished my high school senior year. I was a 4-state champion in wrestling. I played football. I ran track. I went on to go to Illinois State University, where I played football there. I got injured my junior year, and I realized at that point that my dream of playing college football had come to an end. I began to spiral out of control. School wasn't important. Things in my life just didn't matter at the time. So I told my mom, I'm coming home. I'm tired of wasting your money and your time. I picked up a job at a steel mill in the inner city of Chicago, worked that for a year, and probably 2 weeks after that first year, I stopped in a recruiting station, small town in Illinois, walked in the door and told the guy I wanted to jump out of airplanes, shoot the best weapons, and just wreak fury to the world. The guy looked at me kind of like, where'd you just come from? I said, right through your front door. I said, give me 5 days so I could tie up my debt, and I want to be out of here. He said, you got it. Take the test. Let's see where you go. Took the test. Ended up falling into this category of 11 Bravo. For you that don't know what that job is, jumping out of airplanes, shooting the best weapons, and wreaking fury to the world. I got to Fort Benning, Georgia. I was in the recruiting office on Monday, got to Fort Benning, Georgia on Friday, standing on some yellow prints with some short guy about 5'4", 200 pounds, because he looked that way to me, screaming at me, you have basically lost every right you ever had once you stepped off that bus. I said, cool. I get this. This is where I accelerate. I got structure. I got discipline. I've already gone through all this because I've had juniors, sophomores, and freshmen when I was a 6th grader doing the same thing. Saying, you little puke, get over here, put your feet on the footprints, don't look at me, don't say anything. I got it. We're good. I went on to airborne school after being advanced infantry training, went into airborne school. Saw this guy walking around with some OG 107s. It was a starch green Vietnam uniform with a black beret on his head. Came over to me, he said, how you doing, son? I said, good. How are you? I said, good. I noticed you were looking at me. I said, I was. How do I get a part to be in that uniform? I said, you get your butt over there on that truck right now and I'll show you. On my way I went. Went to Ranger Indoctrination Program, 3 weeks of getting my butt kicked there, being told all the other things that I had just suffered through the first 8 months, 9 months. Ended up at 3rd Ranger Battalion. My career in special operations was probably the proudest moment of my life. Besides my kids being born, and besides my wife, that has kind of guided me through struggles of my own horrors of war. I spent 12 years in the military, and I can tell you that the things I've saw, I hope none of you see them. I speak for the veterans that sit in this audience today because I know they've seen horrors of war. Things that when you're sitting in a coffee shop having a cup of coffee and you look out at a blank stare and you hear a glass break, you turn and look, wondering what's going on. To Dr. Marcy's speech about politics in this divided country, It's a scary, scary vision knowing that the United States of America at one point was the greatest nation in the world. We were the most powerful nation in the world. We still are. And why is that? It's because we have men and women around the country who want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. There's students that have come through this school who have had the notion to go into the military. Hank Allen right now, ROTC program in Emory. He's going to be a fine leader stepping forward to take that spot on the Friends of Freedom. I'm training a girl right now as we speak. Most of you know her, Grace Bennett. Thrives to be selfless. Strives to be the next person on that freedom fence to hold the line. Matthew Perez has a dream of being in the Navy. The Navy will be stronger with Matthew Perez being in the Navy. And Matthew Kane has a dream of going to West Point. These are a few of your students, and these are a few of your fellow athletes that have taken it upon themselves, like every veteran that stands in this room today, and raised their right hand and swore an oath to protect this country from domestic and foreign enemies. Abraham Lincoln said, "You cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today." As a nation under one God, we have a responsibility to keep this nation intact. And without people and men and women who raise their right hands daily all over this nation, we wouldn't be able to enjoy the freedoms that we have. For the veterans, the greatest generation that came forth before my generation was the generation that basically said, we have a monster coming through Europe. He's taking lives and he's twisting them and he's wiping out a complete population of young men and women. That great generation stood up and said, "Follow me." That's one of the logos at Fort Benning, Georgia. It's an infantry school. Omaha Beach, Pearl Harbor, Guadalcanal. All of those battles that I speak of were for a common cause. One mission, one country under God. This past weekend, I was at West Point. It was my birthday, and I thought my wife and myself would go up and check out an Army game. Army played Lafayette. And Chris Granging, some of you know him. He plays football for Lafayette. We had a chance to see him play on the field. What was interesting was knowing that as I was coming on to West Point, the echoes of the old gray buildings of every leader that ever walked through there that put on combat boots and decided that he was going to be a part of something bigger than himself began to talk to me. It's funny in the Civil War that the winning general from the North finished dead last in his class at West Point. He was drunk. The valedictorian of that same class was the losing general for the South. Two completely different people, but two completely same in their thinking on what they needed to get done on the battlefield, and that was to win and preserve this nation. In closing, I want to say this. 6 years ago, when I gave this speech, I sent my son to the military. There's parents out here right now wondering the same thing. Their kids are deciding whether or not to go in the military or not. What I can tell you is this. Being a veteran is one of the proudest things of my life. I was willing to give up my son's life for the better of this nation. He went to Afghanistan and came back. But what I can tell you is this. Around this great country as we speak and as we sit in this building today, there are men and women who are raising their hands and swearing an oath to protect us all, no matter if it means they come back or not. And I've seen that flag that flies over every military installation in the United States, and it flies over in Europe and all over the world. I've seen it when it rests on a casket when somebody comes home. We as a nation need to do a better job and stop being divided. Because the young men and women that are raising their hands and are saying to themselves, I will, so help me God, believe that they are about to sacrifice their life for the better of this nation. For our part, my part, as a veteran, and I thank all of the veterans, everyone here, everyone that I've met, everyone that I've seen in my life. And it didn't matter your job of what you did in the military. Every role is important. Every job is important. But what I can say is that as a nation, when these young men and women decide that they raise that hand and they throw aside everything, including their life, to keep us safe, the best thing we can do is dig in with them and do our part and believe that this nation is going to move forward under that flag, under one God, and we will be in every conflict that ever comes to the shores of this country. And I can tell you this, if the enemy wants to bring the fight to these shores, I guarantee you that the fence of this freedom, of this nation, will not crumble. Thank you.
There are not words big enough. There is not a hug strong enough. There is not a smile wide enough. All we can offer is thank you. You are our heroes. You are in our thoughts. You are in our prayers for all you've done. Thank you. As the middle school student government president and on behalf of our middle school student body, it was an honor to pin the veterans in attendance this morning. Our young minds and inexperienced souls cannot even begin to comprehend the sacrifices that you have made. We would like to continue to honor you as we recognize each branch of service. Our high school chorus will perform the Armed Forces Medley, and the middle school flag troop will present you your colors. As each branch is presented, we request that the veterans in attendance stand so that we may honor you. Thank you for your courage, your bravery, and your dedication to this country. We are humbled.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude this morning's program by noting just a couple of things. Community and service are two essential core values for Windermere Preparatory School. These values, of course, are exemplified by the commitment, the service, and the patriotism of our veterans. The lesson in all of this for our students is in that there is no better example of selfless service that we can put in front of you than a veteran. Someone who, as Coach Wood mentioned to me, reminded me in our words together this morning, someone who is willing to put their lives on hold so that we can live ours uninterrupted. So for all of our veterans, we once again say thank you. I do also want to give one more round of thanks to J.D. Wood, not only for your words this morning, but for being a very important part of our community. We're very happy to have you here. So with that, we would like to invite our veterans in attendance and all of our special guests to a reception on the patio. It's behind us here at the Laker Cafe and on dismissal. And if you'll be patient with us, we will dismiss our students in stages, beginning with our lower school. You folks are free to go. Thank you. High school and middle school, hang on.